Here she is. She's head of product delivery at Honeycomb TV, which is London-based, isn't it?
Yes.
And her talk is on this. It's compartmentalised empathy. So I guess I feel like I've had a bit of a preview, but empathy seems to be this double-edged sword. And I do understand that Roisi is going to share with us a personal case study, which we're very grateful for in advance. But are you plugged in?
Yeah, I'm just plugging things into other things.
No, you just carry on.
Apple's being super helpful.
It always is.
Yeah. Hey, oh.
Here we go. Right, you do that.
But now I can't find the button to make it present.
I'll tell you a little bit more about Roisi. Yesterday, she arrived to Manchester, and the first thing that she did was tumble into a hole.
Yeah.
Which was a shame.
I fell over.
She fell over. So I promise Manchester is better than that.
Okay.
Obviously. We've got how many? A few more hours for you to.
Yeah, you got a couple more hours
yeah?
for Manchester to make it up for me.
Right, wonderful.
Or otherwise, I'll just go and stand at the hole and shout.
Yeah, I'll shout.
There's a hole.
I'll shout at it with you. So if you're ready to go.
Yes.
Okay. Welcome Roisi to the stage.
So I'm going to be awkwardly holding the mic pack because I'm not dressed appropriately for mic packs. So hello, my name is Roisi Proven. That's how that's pronounced. I am head of product delivery at a company called Honeycomb TV. This is a little Proven cheat sheet. I wish someone had told me when I was younger that Proven was a cool name to use in things like this, because I would have used it way more before now. So I've been in tech for around 11 years. I came into tech right out of school, which I'll talk a bit more about in a bit. I've actually worked across the whole process. So I started out in test, and then I moved into game design. So I was working as a designer. And also doing a bit of development. I then moved into project management and finally product management. So I've sort of moved across the whole spectrum of the development process. I've run and worked on really large projects in the games industry, in e-commerce for companies like Fortnum & Mason and Tesco's, and currently working in ad tech, doing ad delivery for broadcasters and advertising agencies globally. I'm a little bit weird. That will probably come across as we move through this, as a little bit of pressure being in a comedy club to be funny. But I'm not actually sure how that's going to go, because I like being funny, but this isn't a very funny talk, so it's always a bit of a knife edge. And I like cats, a lot, which will also come up again. I have tattoos of my cats. So I said I liked cats. Yeah, so before I get started, I wanted to talk about trigger warnings, because throughout the day it's been actually really good, because a lot of people have spoken about psychological safety, and I would be remiss to continue that conversation if I didn't allow all of you to have some psychological safety yourselves. So this is a pretty heavy talk, as Shahina said. It's a personal case study. It's influenced the way that I work and the way that I lead, but it is incredibly personal. So there is discussion of death, of grief, of mental illness. And if at any point any of that makes you feel at all uncomfortable, please feel free to get up and go outside, have a breather. You can come back. You don't have to come back. That's totally fine. I don't want you sitting here feeling uncomfortable because of something I'm saying. I've chosen to share this story with you, but you don't have to be here to listen if it's not comfortable for you. So because it's quite a personal thing, and because it's quite heavy-hitting, I like to give someone to think about something. I like to give people something to think about up front that's a little bit lighter, so you can call back to it. So Vicky had the chaos cats. I have the levity cats. So these aren't memes, these are just my cats. This is Scout, and this is Noms Chomsky. She's named after a famous linguist. She doesn't speak very good English, though. She's blepping, and that right there, that's a derp. So if at any point you feel like you need a little bit of levity after what I've been talking about, just think about the blep and think about the derp. So I'm going to be talking a lot about empathy in this. But, what is empathy? A lot of people can get confused between empathy and sympathy in particular. The way I like to put it is sympathy is I know how you feel, like, oh, it's all right. Whereas empathy is I feel how you feel. My lived experiences as a human being allows me to really, truly understand what you're going through. And that difference is very distinct. Apathy is I don't care. So isn't sympathy enough? And in certain circumstances, absolutely. Sometimes all people need is a hug. But in my working life and in leadership, I feel like there has to be a little bit more intent to it. Because if I'm just telling someone it'll be okay when it won't, that's not helpful to them, and that's not going to help them do their job productively and be happy at work. So I really need to expend a little bit more energy to help them understand that I can identify with their problems and I'm going to help them get through it. I'm not just going to be in the background. So there's this really good illustration by Tom Morgan-Jones that shows the difference between sympathy, empathy, and apathy. So you've got this guy in the middle and he's stuck in some quicksand. The sympathy guy is like, it's okay, but he's like also in the quicksand and he's not actually going to help the person get out. He's like, oh, but like that's not, now they're just both sinking. Empathy is reaching across that barrier, using your emotional strength to raise someone up who's in a position of emotional and psychological weakness. Apathy guy is just an asshole. I really hope that there's a hole on the other side that apathy guy falls into, and then like sympathy guy and empathy guy can just be like, ah, apathy guy got what was coming. So for me, it's really, really important to differentiate between sympathy and empathy because they aren't the same thing and there's a lot of different intentions behind each one. So a little bit more about me. I grew up normally. Like I aged and got taller and stuff. Then in high school, I started to experience mental health issues. As a result, because kids are cruel, I was bullied fairly relentlessly. And so I left school at 16. I didn't go to college, I didn't go to university, I didn't feel able to, I didn't feel emotionally equipped to, but I knew that I couldn't stay where I was doing what I was doing, which was nothing. So as a kind of emotionally vulnerable woman, just hitting the age of 18, I decided that the games industry would be a perfect place. And long story short, the stories that people tell about the games industry and the toxic culture that exists there is entirely earned and justified. And I went in there totally naive, very young, thinking, oh, this is just going to be amazing. And after 9 months of 80-hour weeks and bullying and abuse at work, I had a breakdown. I ran away to Japan, stayed there for 2 months, and then came back, and that kind of could have been it for me in tech. I could have gone back home, lived with my parents, and sort of just put it behind me. But I realized that actually tech was where I wanted to be, despite all of the problems that I'd had in that industry and had with the people there. I realized that there was something really special about delivering this thing that is intangible but so useful in all realms of life. And you know, that's why I really like the talk earlier about the Institute of Sport, because it's something that you don't think about when you think about tech delivery, but the tech is everywhere, it's utilized by everyone, and so that was something that I really wanted to stay involved in. And so as I moved through my career and got sort of more elevated up, I decided that, you know, I really needed to define my leadership style, because that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a leader of people. I didn't really want to be anyone's boss, because I'm not a fantastic boss. I'm not very good at sort of being commanding over people. It makes me feel kind of uncomfortable and weird. But I do like leading people. I like allowing people to be the best version of themselves at work, because for me, work-life balance is about being able to bring your life to work and being honest about who you are as a person at work. And so I realized that that was the kind of leader that I wanted to be. And to do that, I decided that I wanted to really utilize the empathy that I felt I had. And it was something I always had growing up. As someone with mental health issues, anxiety and depression, I felt that I could identify with people who were struggling perhaps a little bit more. And so I wanted to use that to help as many people as I possibly could. So I started thinking of empathy as my superpower. It's the Robin, you know, I'm like empathy girl. I get a cape and stuff. Someone had once suggested I should get a cape, and I was super into that idea. So if anyone knows where to make a cape. And, you know, I was so proud of myself because I was like, you know, I'm really identifying with people, and I'm really kind of like putting everything into my job, and I'm making people feel better about their jobs, and I'm making people succeed. And that's an amazing thing for me, because to me, I haven't succeeded unless the people around me are succeeding. Like, if I succeed alone, I've failed. So the fact that I could help people and identify people with people enough to help them grow in their work and their lives was so exciting to me. But that's not sustainable. And kind of before I go into exactly why that's not sustainable, I want to talk a little bit about spoon theory. So this is something that some people might have heard of. It was originally developed by someone who suffers from lupus, which is a chronic physical illness. And it was used to describe the varying levels of energy that she found herself having from day to day. But actually, it can be used to illustrate emotional capacity as well. So I've got some props. This is the only thing that business cards is useful for. And, you know, the whole thing about spoon theory is that you only have so many spoons in a day. And when you run out of spoons, you don't do anything else. It's not like you can borrow spoons from tomorrow, because all your spoons are dirty. So it's not like you can be, oh, I'll just go, oh, no, I've not. There's physically no more that you can do. And by trying to do more, you're putting yourself at a really dangerous deficit. I don't know why that's happening. No. And so this is kind of illustrating my spoons for an average day. Some days you'll have 1 spoon. Some days you'll have 38 spoons. As someone who has mental illness, a lot of the spoons are just kind of immediately used by waking up in the morning. Because I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, Jesus. That's how I wake up. It's quite alarming. For my boyfriend as well. And, you know, so I've only got, on this day that I've just chosen, I've got 3 spoons left because I've just chucked 2 spoons away. And, you know I'm going to have a quite challenging day at work. And so I get up and I go out and I get on the tube. That's a spoon gone, because the tube is hard work when you're an anxious person. I mean, it's hard work for anyone, but when you see bears everywhere, everyone on the tube is a bear. And I get into work, and I sit down at my desk, and my boss comes up to me and says, Roshi, that deadline that we had, it's now 2 weeks earlier, so whatever you were doing to make things run on time, do that, but faster. And so I've got 1 left. And I scheduled all of my one-to-ones for today. So I have one-to-ones with 8 people on 1 emotional spoon. And that's not good enough for me. So I do my first one-to-one, and then what do? I can't not listen to the people that rely on me. I can't reschedule everything because they've been relying on me to do it at that time. So I have to just push through. And I found myself in a very, very dangerous psychological deficit. And I sort of was a bit blasé about it. I realized, you know, oh, it'll be fine, I'll just push through, it'll just be another 3 weeks, everything will be okay. That's not what happens in life. So this is where it gets pretty personal. I feel like ruthless honesty is the way that I move forward with things. So I'd been having kind of a rough time at work anyway. I'd been really sort of pushing to help more people. And at this point, I was working with my best friend. And I was away. I was on the other side of the world and saw a Facebook post from her. And it was a memorial post. And that already is rough, you know, because grief is a really challenging thing to go through for anyone. I'm sure almost everyone in this room has gone through grief at some point. You've lost someone that was important to you. But this post was different. There was a tone to it that made me just clench up inside. So I called her and I spoke to her. And her cousin had been murdered at Pulse nightclub shooting. And all these cards pale in comparison to the emotional strength that you need to go through something like that. When every shop you walk into has your family member's face. And I couldn't make it better. I couldn't use my superpower. This was my kryptonite. This was what I tried so hard, and I poured everything into trying to help her. And it's just like dropping something into a black hole, because I can't identify with that. That kind of grief is not something that I have any frame of reference for. And her pain and her sadness was just tearing both of us up, because I was guilty at myself that I couldn't help her. And so I'd got myself into this deficit that was already becoming unmanageable, and I was struggling and pushing, and I was like, maybe if I just get to Christmas, if I can just get to Christmas, everything will be okay. And then my dad, solid chap, goes and has a heart attack. And I actually was doing a conference talk, and on the morning of my conference talk, I was putting my dad in an ambulance, and I had to walk away from the ambulance and go in and do the conference talk. Not this one, just one about like enterprise software and how it's rubbish. And it's called The Horrors of Enterprise Software, if you want to have a look. But it's not the kind of thing you want to talk about after someone that you love has had a heart attack, because it doesn't really feel very relevant anymore. I'm like, yeah, enterprise software is crap, but my dad's pretty good. So I'd quite like to be over there, but you know, thankfully, like my parents have like a pretty good sense of humor, and like the last thing my dad said to me before he like got taken away in the ambulance was, "Don't forget your keys!" And he yelled from the ambulance. I was halfway down the street and he was shouting, and I could see the paramedics going, "No, shush, hush, hush, heart attack." And he's like, "But she might have forgotten her keys." And so, you know, that helps, but it doesn't help enough. So I had a breakdown, full-on mental break. And it's not really like you see in the films. You don't kind of get dragged kicking and screaming to a mental hospital, and Angelina Jolie's not there, which was super disappointing. And it's, oh, I'm talking too much on this one slide. And it's actually the gray area between things. It's a space which nobody should really inhabit for any length of time. It's a feeling of just blank. And when people talk about feeling suicidal, it's not that you want to kill yourself, it's just that you don't really understand what life is anymore. And that's where I got to. And that's not really a good place for anyone to be. So I decided that I needed to change the way that I approached this part of my life, and so that I could be sustainable and still help these people at work without completely destroying my entire sense of self. And so I got into therapy, which I would recommend for anyone. Even if you think you're the most mentally healthy person in the entire world, therapy is great. It's like a massage for the soul. It's just like, I would recommend it to everyone. So I got into therapy. I realized I actually needed to change jobs because the job that I had wasn't supporting me in the way that I needed them to. And we decided to start talking about coping mechanisms. Because with me, my key problem was that, as I said before, everything is a bear. Anxiety is the amplification of your fight or flight response that you're only really supposed to have when you're fighting something or running away from a bear. But to me, like, a scary book is a bear. A Gantt chart is definitely a bear. And so I needed to sort of come up with ways to package these emotions. And that's what I talk about. That's what I think about when I talk about empathy, compartmentalized empathy. I'm not talking about pushing things down. I don't know if anyone's seen the Book of Mormon, but there's a song in it about compartmentalization. And it's all about kind of like, if you're gay, like shove it in a box in the back of your head and crush it. And like, that's not what I'm talking about. It's not about leaving your feelings at the door. It's about leaving other people's feelings at the door on the way out. So we came up with the box. So this is something that's actually a physical thing that I did for a while. I can now do it in my head. And at first I was like, well, it's going to be a little bit weird doing this with people, but frankly, it's better to look crazy than go crazy. And so we came up with this thing that whenever I was getting really deep into a conversation where I needed to help someone and I needed to take on their feelings, I can't take them home with me. I can't shoulder them forever and think about them like they're my own problems, because they aren't. And that's not just bad for me, that's disrespecting the person whose experiences they are. So we had this experiment. Actually, the first person that I did it with was my same friend. We went out for dinner and we talked for hours, and she cried and we hugged, and I told her that I loved her and I would be there for her. And then at the end of the day, I was going home and I said, wait, hang on a second. I've got something for you. And she was like, why didn't you give it me earlier? But fine. And I sort of held my hand out, and she sort of cocked her head and she's like, there's not anything there. And I was like, yes, there is. These are your feelings. They're in a box, it's very pretty, and I'd like to give them back to you now. And bless her little cotton sock, she took the box, like physically out of my hands. I was like, bye! And I was like breathing out. It was like I finally found a way to be the person that I wanted to be the leader that I wanted to be without pouring too much of myself into it. And that's when I decided that I would see empathy as my sidekick, the Robin to my Bat person. And it means that I can still be really, really empathetic to people in my work and at home, but that I'm not carrying all their feelings around. Because previously I was just this sponge. And a sponge can only carry so much water before, I don't know what happens to sponges when they've got too much water. They just don't carry anymore. But that analogy got away from me slightly. And I found that it was finally something that I could do, that I could be that person to help people and be that leader that I wanted to be. And the reason that I talk about this in conferences like this is because I think it's really, really relevant to delivering good products, because happy people deliver good products. Unhappy people aren't productive. Unhappy people are unhappy. They might look productive on the face of it, but it's like a swan, it's sort of nice and calm on the surface of the water, but then underneath they're like this. And if I can help people be happier at work, then they deliver more efficiently. And it's that psychological safety that is more important to me than anything else. You can teach most things, but making someone feel safe in their environment is something that you have to provide for them. And a lot of times when I talk about this at tech conferences, they're like, you know what, I'm just going to stick computers. People are really hard. Computers are really easy. I'm just going to do that. But you know what? Computers don't make sense either. Like, people are hard, computers are also hard. And just as a few examples, I took JavaScript, which is quite a well-known language. And this is things making sense in JavaScript. So null counts as an object. So null is a thing. Nan, which is not a number, equals number. That's its type. And 0.1 plus 0.2 does not equal 0.3. And I still haven't figured out why, but that has caused problems in e-commerce. When math doesn't make any sense anymore, you've got issues. Maths and time zones are the two banes of my existence. So, some practical takeaways, because it would be silly of me to just come up and tell you a story and not give you anything to take away from this. Empathy isn't a superpower. It's a state of being. It's something that you need to have within you, and you need to foster within yourself. You can't it doesn't just sort of sprout. And it isn't magic. It takes hard graft to develop and maintain. You matter. You always need to think when you're doing something like this as a product leader or as a leader in your company, can I handle this? Am I taking too much on here? Because, like I said, unhappy people aren't productive, and that counts for you too. When I had my breakdown, I was off work for 3 weeks. That's like the opposite of productive. Like, Netflix kept asking me if I was okay. I was like, no Netflix. And so you really need to think about it and ask yourself if you can handle it. And if you can't, you need to be honest and step away from the problem. Take the feelings, wrap them up, give them back. So like I said, don't leave your feelings on the door at the way in. Leave the other people's feelings on the door at the way out. I don't buy this thing that you shouldn't be emotional at work. I've come across that a lot as a woman because, you know, I do the ugly crying thing too, like, for sure. And there's a Tina Fey quote that I really love talking about crying at work. And it's like, cry at work because it terrifies everyone. And it really does, because I've been sat in meetings and I cry when I'm angry. So they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm really pissed off at you, but this is happening instead, so let's just go with it. So don't hide your own emotions, but don't take on other people's, because it's not going to be healthy. This is a really good quote from a guy called Kai Jacobs, who did a talk at AlterConf London on empathy. And it's empathy isn't learned, it's earned. So this kind of works one of two ways. From his context, it was marginalized people have higher states of empathy because they've experienced more issues in their lives. People who have gone through trouble, abusive childhoods, depression, anxiety, tend to have a higher level of empathy because they understand what it's like to feel hopeless. And so for him, it was our unfortunate empathy advantage, because as a person of color, he wanted to explain that he had these amazing levels of empathy because he'd faced so much abuse coming up through his career and his life. But also, you can't just learn empathy from a book. You can't read a book on empathy and know what it means. You need to have experiences. You need to go out and feel things and be open and emotional and love people and hate people, because if you just keep things on a level forever, you aren't able to really identify with the people that you meet in your life, and you should be able to identify with as wide a variety of people as possible because they all matter equally. So these are some references from things that I've spoken about. The top one is about kind of empathy versus sympathy. There's something about the spoon theory. There's some more oddities about JavaScript. And there's a link to Kaid's talk. So started in the margins, and now we hear our unfortunate empathy advantage. So I'll give you like 2 secs to take a picture of that, because usually this would be where I finish. I'm just waiting, just in case anyone else is taking a picture. I'll tweet these as well. I did it again. It's very much do as I say, not as I do kind of a situation. So last time I did this talk, I've done this talk twice before. I did it last in October of last year. 3 days before I did the talk, the same friend called me up and said, "Have you seen the news?" And it was the week of the Las Vegas shooting. And my heart broke because 96 more families were going through what my friend went through that day, that month, that year. And she felt hopeless because it was happening again. She thought, you know, we can fight this and it'll get better and there'll be gun control and it'll be great and this won't happen to anyone else. And then it did, and it keeps happening and it keeps hurting. And so I took my own advice, or I tried to. It still took me a week to get through everything. And I said to her, like, is there anything I can do to help? And we spoke about it, and we figured, I have a platform. It's a small platform. This is actually the first time that I've done this talk where I've actually been on a platform. So that's pretty good. So I wanted to end the talk in a slightly different way. So I want to dedicate this talk to Jerry. Jerry was a man who shouldn't be dead, but he is. And if I can use my platform to get across to one person to make sure that nobody else has to feel like my friend felt, then I will. So this is for Jerry. This is for everything he could have done. And if you have any friends in the US or you have any connections to the US, these two organizations, Mums Demand Action and everytown.org, are really, really proactive organizations against, for gun control in America. And it's really, really important to me to share this, even though we're not in the US, we don't have a gun control problem here, but it still affects people everywhere. There are families of people here who have lost people because of things like this. So if I can do anything to help without putting myself at risk, it's to do something like this. So this was for Jerry, and thank you all very much for listening. I don't know if anyone wants to. I can say it if you want. It's a little bit hard to see in the questions after that, but you can if you like.
Am I on? Yeah. Thank you, Roisi. I think you are like a super person, because it's quite difficult to be so courageous and so vulnerable, full stop, but then to do it in a room full of people on an actual platform is something else. So thank you so much. Shall I help you pick up your spoons?
And I will pick up my spoons. I shouldn't litter, really. I'm a Boy Scout.